The entire concept of having a team in Kalamazoo was brought to the Parfits and Jim Gilmore by Henry Grooms. Henry Grooms ran the Kalamazoo Boxing Academy, and Henry Grooms was looking for a facility where he could hold his boxing matches. And he went to Ted Parfit, Jim Gilmore, had a conversation about bringing a professional hockey team here to Kalamazoo, affiliating with the Detroit Red Wings, to fill the dates when Henry wasn't putting on his boxing performances. And that's how it all got started. We were underway, and in a mere matter of 10 months, I think it was, they were still bolting down the seats in the stadium on opening night in mid-October. So this stadium was thrown together very, very fast. An architectural firm worked very closely with Bob Lemieux in constructing the facility to Bob's liking. And Bob, being the hockey guy and competitor that Bob was, took the liberties, I guess, of making the facility advantageous to the Kalamazoo Wings by positioning the benches in a certain way that gave Kalamazoo an advantage on line changes for 2 periods out of 3, something that most people wouldn't think anything of, but Bob certainly did and took advantage of those things and constructed the building that way. He also had the Wings bench elevated so he could see a little better up and over the players. He kept the visitors bench very low, so coaches like Ted Garvin, that was probably no more than 5'6" or 8", couldn't see, and made it difficult on the visiting team in all aspects of the hockey game. So there's a lot of history in the way that building was constructed.
Is winning the Turner Cup. That was the biggest one, playing against Grand Rapids, not winning in their arena, and playing the 7th game there, tied going in the 3rd period, and we had Al Jensen, our goalie, was hurt.
In the end, Larry hurt his knee in the playoffs. I had to go in and play and ended up winning MVP and obviously the Turner Cup for 79-80. So that was an exciting time, drinking from the Turner Cup.
And so it worked out great, and everybody was, in the end, it was, Bob Lemieux said it was going to be a 5-year championship, and that was the 5th year, and we got a championship.
We partied at the stadium. Then we went back to the stadium in Kalamazoo, and then the owner of Pizza King opened up on Portage Street, who was a Kwings fan, opened up the pizza place, and we went there, and I finally got home 5 a.m. I think. I thought, oh, well, I'll go to sleep for a little while and get up and go to work. Well, I called my boss and said, I'm not coming in, I have too much to do today. We had a luncheon at noon, we had a parade in from Bronson Park all the way through town, and then there was another big party put on by High Wheeler that night. Then we partied, I mean, for days.
We were sitting in a weekly meeting, staff meeting in Kalamazoo, and Bob Lemieux had said at the time, you know, we need to build the attendance. What can we do to build the attendance? And of course, everyone put their thinking caps on. And being Irish, being from the city of Boston, I just recalling some of the events that took place in March for St. Patrick's Day. And then I said to Bob, why don't we dye the ice green? And he looked at me like I was nuts, as did everyone else in the room. And I said, no, I'm serious. I said, why don't we dye the ice green for St. Patrick's Day? And we'll promote this. We'll do all types of special promotions. And so then we held the event on March 17th, and we sold the place out. I think we had 5,400 people there that night. It was huge. But the funny part of the whole evening was how are we going to dye the ice green? We thought, well, let's do it with food coloring. So we loaded up the Zamboni with its water where they resurface, and we filled up the tank with food coloring, which we bought by the gallon from Gordon Foods, I think. And the ice kind of came out striped more than it did completely green. And what we didn't know was that there's a chemical in food coloring that actually prevents frostings from freezing on a cake. Well, it did the same thing to the ice. It didn't allow it to freeze. And we had puddles here and there, and we had laid down shamrocks over all of the face-off dots, and we made those out of cardboard. and they started to develop air pockets underneath. They popped up and cracked, and it was actually a mess. It really was a mess. Players, when they were knocked down, got up and they had green dye all over their uniforms, and then since that point, we found ways to perfect it, and we painted the ice rather than using food coloring, and we laid down tissue paper for the logos rather than cardboard, and we kept building on the evening, giving away trips to Ireland, and we did all kinds of stuff, Irish music, and it just became a huge event.
The minor league game has changed a ton. When we first started back in the early 80s, or when I first started back in the early 80s, there was a lot of fighting. It was the slap shot type of game. You get on the bus, you might ride for 8 hours. You get off the bus, you play your game, you get back on the bus, and you ride for 8 hours more. Kind of a rogue, if you will, situation where it was a pretty tough league back then. As we evolved, and the second time that I came around in '93, it had changed into a more professional league. We were starting to fly places. We were starting to play in bigger cities, Chicago, Detroit, LA, Salt Lake City, Phoenix, a lot of those cities that had NHL teams. So it became more professional, less fighting, more emphasis on the game. The players started making more money, therefore it became more professional.
I think over the years, the hockey in general has improved. I think players are in much better shape. They take care of their bodies a lot better, nutrition-wise. I think the equipment is a lot better. I remember back in the days when most of the players did not wear face shields at all, or any kind of shields. There were still a few players back in that day that didn't have to wear helmets. They were grandfathered in, so you could see them flying along with the hair.
As we went on, the players, they were more individuals later on in my career here. Like myself, I went to Milwaukee and Neil came there, and we had good teams there. But the players that stuck here when we were younger, we had a good nucleus because we all wanted to play for each other. And my last year here, it was like the players wanted to get up to the NHL, and they're more individuals. It wasn't like a team. So it was, at the end, it was sort of disappointing because they didn't have that camaraderie.
45 years ago, those players were very young and just came out of juniors. Most of them had not even a high school education. And now most of them have college educations. And so I'm not saying it one way is wrong or another, but I think they're a lot better equipped to go into life after hockey.
And then 2006, they won the Colonial Cup, and we went to all the away games there. That the Kwings, I mean, they swept all the way to Danbury, Connecticut, and my husband and I decided to go to Danbury because they had a chance of actually winning the cup there. I was sitting in the press box next to the commissioner, Richard Brosal, at the time, and he said, "Are you going?" And I said, "Well, yeah." So he said, "Are you flying or driving?" And I said, "No, we're going to drive." And he said, "We need someone to take the Colonial Cup to Danbury." And I'm going, okay. In Danbury, they had a very vocal section that I guess was notorious among whatever league it was in before. And Danbury, I have to say, before we got there, one of our editors decided it would be a good idea for our sports editor to write a really, we're going to trash the trashers type of column. And Danbury was supposed to do the same thing. Well, our sports editor did what he was supposed to do. Theirs took a leave of absence, and so someone who never covered the team actually wrote a very nice article. And when we went, when I was at the arena, I actually had security. They put security with me so that the fans wouldn't do anything to me to harm me, I guess. And they were, the one section was, I mean, I don't know, I don't even know how to describe it. And they were really on Joel Martin. And I credit him so much with the job he did in spite of hearing all the slurs and the names that they called him. And it was an experience.
Definitely a special team and situation, and you know what? It really made it a great place to play. Their fans were they were really loud and just all over you, and you know you couldn't pick a better place to win a championship. In their rink in front of their fans was awesome. Just that, and I mean, I'll never forget you know, Lucas Drake's, you know, overtime winning goal. That was you know, the best feeling I've had in professional hockey, seeing that one go in and being able to celebrate a championship with your teammates.
Right from the get-go, you knew that we had a special group. We had a group that was super tight, super talented, and really competed hard. We played hard and we competed hard at the same time, and on and off the ice was the same thing. So it was a group that was real tight all the time. We're very fortunate to run through a pretty hot stretch leading into the postseason. I think we lost one game in our last 10, and then going through the playoffs, we only lost one game in the finals to Danbury. And we had a group of guys that really bought into the team concept. And really what you do by winning those championships is the journey is the fun part, right? You know, the final climax is amazing, don't get me wrong. You feel that sense of relief because you've done that. But really what you've done is you've recreated lasting memories that are going to stick with you forever. And you look at the teams that you've played on, you don't forget any of the players that played with you on the championship team. And you know, I had Tyler Renette as a centerman, and Corey Carlander on that team, and Tyler Willis on that team, and Jeff Rayner, and Joel Martin, and Villeneuve, and Mike Manley, and I could probably tell you the whole team if I went through the list in my head, just because you'll never forget those guys.
One of the funniest things that ever happened when I was covering the Kalamazoo Wings was Mel Engelstad, who was a fan favorite. He was a fighter. Usually in the locker room with their lockers, or where they keep their things, they have their first initial and then their last name. And for him, M for Mel, Engelstad didn't fit, so his ended up Mangler. And so that's kind of his nickname. But he was the enforcer. We were playing Fort Wayne at the time. And Eric Boganicki, who was a young player who actually ended up in the NHL, but with Fort Wayne, was much smaller than Mel, kept irritating him and trying to get him into a fight, trying to goad him into a fight. So finally, Mel just turned around and kissed him smack on the lips and skated away. And Boganicki got a roughing penalty, and Mel got an unsportsmanlike conduct and was eventually suspended for a game.
I think hockey players are a different mentality that way. They can block out that pain. I'll always remember in Pittsburgh that I had a player, Al Samuelson, who fractured his cheekbone, got hit with a puck and fractured his cheekbone. And he went into the bathroom, and I heard him laughing in there, and I thought, what is he doing? So I walked in there. He had plugged his nose and blew the cheek, actually blew a ball of air up in his cheek, and he thought that was funny. Went out to finish the game. And these guys, I don't want to say they're stupid by any means. They just have a way to block out pain.
When I first started, Pete Stobie told me to, wear a headband or, something to absorb the sweat, because, oh my gosh, as soon as you get in that costume, you are sweating within 5 minutes, like literally dripping sweat within 5 minutes. And so I had a bandana on, and all of a sudden I was skating out on the ice, and all of a sudden the bandana fell over my eyes, and I couldn't see anything. I had no idea where I was. And I just stood there like, okay, I'm blind. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. I just would take a couple of steps, and Kip, who still works at Wing Stadium, Waukee, who's a security guard, he yells out, he's like, Slappy, are you okay? And I'm like, mm-mm, No. He's like, what's wrong? Are you having a seizure? I'm like, So security and people came out to get me, and they're like, what's wrong? Are you all right? And I'm like, my bandana fell over my eyes. I can't see where I am. So I went off the ice, I fixed my bandana, and I got back out on the ice again, and everybody's like, yay, you know. So that was probably one of my first experiences being traumatized.
We are so fortunate in Kalamazoo to have a professional sports team, and there's such a great history and tradition with our Kalamazoo Wings / Michigan K-Wings, now Kalamazoo Wings again. And I think that the original owners of this team would be very proud of the fact that it's continued on for as many years as that it has. I hope that the people in this community don't take this team for granted and let it slip away, that they embrace professional sports, and in particular professional ice hockey, which is a great game. Attend the games, attend the events that are out at the stadium, and let's use this place to our advantage and make this a better community to live in. And I think the Kalamazoo Wings do just that. They make it a far better place and a far better community to live in.